It is the 11 Dubcast. I'm Johnny. He's George. And RIP men's basketball season, basically.
It's been dead for a month if you've been paying attention. Am I right?
Well, not, look,
No,
the 11 Dubcast might have called it early, right? But I think now we've got the coroner coming in and making the official time and date here for men's basketball. We were not convinced several weeks ago when people were talking about how Ohio State was on the bubble and they still had a shot, and we're like,
an 85% chance to make the NCAA tournament, they said.
Not for 1 second believe that was actually the case, and as has transpired, it was not the case. Ohio State did not make the final field of 68. I think they were like number 3 out. Was that the case when the selection?
They weren't even like the last Big Ten team out of the tournament.
Yeah, Indiana.
Because Indiana also got snubbed.
Yeah, so Ohio State's out. They went out with a whimper against Iowa in the Big Ten tournament. Very Holtmanian-esque fashion.
Holtmanian. Let's go with that.
Yeah, I like that one. It was pretty bad. It was just a team that couldn't buy a shot for long stretches of the game. And, that
might have been Mobley's worst game of the season, honestly, or certainly one of them at least.
The bench contributing nothing. This is again a theme. And look, like the reason why they played themselves out of NCAA contention is because they could not find consistent offense. They didn't get any contribution from their centers or their bench, and you saw that again in the Big Ten tournament. So Ohio State's out. They may still play as of this recording in the Crown tournament, which is something which is something that I've never heard of until this year. I know it's this like inaugural season.
Well, that's why you've never heard of it before this year, because it's the inaugural.
Well, I was just so the Crown. We need this is one of the times when I think we should have like a soundboard, because we really need some kind of like British fanfare playing in the background, like dun, 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 or like God Save the Queen or something.
If we had a soundboard, like 90% of it would just be Metal Gear Solid.
That's true.
We've been over this before.
We would waste an entire episode just like recapping Metal Gear Solid 4. Anyway, I was not aware of this tournament until literally like 2 weeks ago, when I knew it would be a possibility Ohio State was going to play in it, and I don't care about it, so I'm not going to waste any brain cells thinking about it. I think they might actually be contractually obligated to play into it, so they can't even reject it. They have to play in this like miserable fail son tournament in Vegas that nobody actually cares about. Which would be, I think, maybe a just punishment for how they kind of finished the season.
Well, what's going to happen is they'll fly out there, and then they'll be in Vegas for a few days, and then Aaron Bradshaw will gamble away his $1 million in NIL money, and then they'll just kind of go through the motions, lose by 15 points to whatever team they get matched up with, and go home and call it a season.
What if this
and then everybody's gonna hit the portal and the mass exodus will begin?
Well, and so that's the thing that I think Ohio State men's basketball really actually has to be worried about here, because I was actually going back through our Slack archives from last season, and people were talking about Bruce Thornton maybe leaving then. Okay. And so the possibility of Bruce Thornton leaving now seems much higher. And you're looking at like a full rebuild, which that's rough, particularly when you're talking about a program does not seem to be getting the lion's share of money when it comes to like NIL and coaching and, all of the other things that makes a team successful in 2025. So this could be a much worse offseason, I think, than last off season. And one of the things that it got me thinking about was like, when was the last time Ohio State basketball kind of had a stretch where they had this level of not just mediocrity, but just kind of like miserable results. And I know that there were 3 seasons in a row where they didn't make the tournament. One of those was because they weren't allowed to make the tournament. They were banned from postseason play. So I don't know that I would necessarily count that, which means that you really have to go to the mid 90s when Ohio State was like going 6-22 and 10-17 and 13-16 and whatnot. Just really kind of the
Gross.
dregs of the Big Ten. So almost like 30 years since they have been this consistently like kind of bad, honestly. I wouldn't say bad, obviously. I mean, the mediocre
Well,
is probably
the
more
good news
accurate, but
is, as Ohio State's arch rival just proved, if you hire the right person, you can go from the bottom, literally last place in the conference, to winning the conference tournament within a year. So
yeah.
perhaps there is hope yet for Ohio State fans.
Yes, if only Dusty May was available. So that sucks. All of that sucks. It's the first, I think, multi-year reset that they're really going to have to deal with since, like I said, the mid '90s. Um, you know, this is, I think, one of the bigger points that we've talked about, which is that it's not enough to be a good coach. You have to be a good program manager. And I think, again, we've said this. I think Diebler is a good coach. I think ultimately he knows ball. He can play, guys and get them in the right positions and get them excited about playing for Ohio State. But whether or not he is,
unless they're getting fat NIL checks.
well, yeah, right. So, whether or not he can actually manage a roster and build this up, that remains to be seen. And this next offseason is going to be, man, that's a hell of a trial by fire. I think he's going to have to endure. So I don't know. I don't know how optimistic you are for this coming season after all of this, but I am not, I guess, would be what
No,
I would say.
I'm not either. And it's like all of the things that we were skeptical of a year ago have come to pass.
Right.
And I don't think the prognosis is very good in terms of what is to come. What I think is particularly disheartening about this coming off season relative to the previous off season is we were very, very worried about losing Felix Okpara relative to Aaron Bradshaw coming in. And everybody just watched Felix Okpara play a pivotal role for Tennessee in the SEC championship on Sunday.
Yeah.
Now, Tennessee ended up losing to Florida, but you have to imagine between whatever money Okpara got from Tennessee and the fact that he's actually in the NCAA tournament as opposed to Ohio State, he has to feel like he absolutely made the best decision for himself. And you wonder how many people that are seeing that or even played with Okpara the previous season are looking at and saying, do I need to do something similar for the sake of my own career? In that sense, I can't imagine Bruce Thornton is going to stick around. You would almost have to assume that he's going to go to some SEC team that's going to pay him, presumably more money than he would be getting at Ohio State to stick around for a fourth year and potentially not make the tournament.
Yeah.
You wonder how many members of this roster aren't, like, how big is this forthcoming exodus going to be? And then on top of that, the two biggest acquisitions that they got in the portal last year on a name basis that they presumably paid the most NIL money for were largely a net negative relative to the value that was ponied up for them. And so even if someone like Bradshaw leaves, you wonder what kind of talent that they're actually going to be able to attract to come in and fill the void left by not only the players that didn't really contribute based on what their dollar amount value was coming in, but also the guys that were here before that were key pillars of the program for the last 2-3 years.
Right.
Bruce Thornton deserved better than this. It's a shame that he didn't get to make the tournament while he was at Ohio State. I have to imagine he's going to be a critical piece of whatever team he ends up on next year, and that whatever team he's on that is going to be dedicating more resources to basketball than what Ohio State has decided to pledge for whatever reason is going to be a tournament team with the contributions that he makes to them. But I don't know how you can feel. I like Mobley. I'm hoping Mobley doesn't leave. I'm not even necessarily sold on anybody else needing to stick around for this program right now, and that makes me really concerned. The joke that I made at the after the Iowa game was that Michi Johnson has been playing 4D chess the whole season. He decided to sit out, still get paid the same, and that inadvertently tanks the team, causing everybody to leave. And so when Michi is left standing in the ashes and rubble of Ohio State basketball, he's the only guy left to dominate the ball and jack
That's
up
right.
25 shots per game next season.
Who are you going to pay now?
Exactly.
No, I mean, it's not a terrible move if that's the case. No, it's just, it sucks in general, but it also sucks specifically because you did have that glimmer of hope that Ohio State was going to get back to the tournament, that they were going to make some noise, that they were starting to figure some things out. And they had some great wins over the course of the season. But, you know, blowing it that hard down the stretch.
If a couple games go a little bit differently, it's a very different conversation, which is a very frustrating reality to be in. But at the same time, the actually good teams don't leave you with any sort of doubt.
They're in the
like
tournament.
That.
Those teams
That's
are in the
right.
tournament. And that's really the long and short of it. And, you know, really ultimately it all, when we talk about success relative to, you know, Ohio State football, right? Against which any program is going to be judged, like you've got to show some kind of postseason success. And I don't know. I mean, when was the last time Ohio State got past the second weekend, right? Like the second game of the tournament, like into the second weekend. Like it's been a minute, right? Like it's been a while. And to see a Michigan team, which was immediately, again, as you mentioned, the worst team in the Big Ten last season, which was then immediately bolstered by Dusty May bringing his FAU guys out, you know, with them up there to Ann Arbor.
It bears repeating. They had a 3-17 record in conference play last season, and they were just
hot
won the
garbage
conference tournament.
Right.
It's
they were
unbelievable.
Terrible. Yeah, and now they're what, like a 4 seed or something like that. I mean, they're, you know, it's ridiculous.
And May largely did it with transfers.
Yes, correct.
Many of which presumably could have gone to Ohio State, as opposed to its arch rival.
Right. So I don't know. I mean, if you really care about the Crown Tournament, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be, you know, raining on your parade, but for the 99.9% of us that don't, I think this kind of confirms some of our, you know, more persistent fears about the team. So it stinks. It sucks. But now, you know, Ohio State and company have a lot of work to do. Or Jake Diebler and company have a lot of work to do with Ohio State here in the offseason. And one of the things that I thought was notable, Kyle Jones pointed out this on the site, which is that Ohio, as you know, a basketball state, is stacked in 25-26. Like there's a lot of really, really good prospects in state. You have to show them something. Not only that you can be a successful program, but that you're willing to like attract them to Ohio State. And this isn't like football, okay? Like you can't just write off Xavier or Cincinnati or, you know, like UD. Like those are programs.
I think it is going to be like football in the sense that they let a lot of really good in-state talent on the offensive line get away from them from a lot of years. And those guys ended up going to Clemson.
Yeah.
I think you're probably going to see something similar the next 2 years, given what the program has shown the last 3.
Yeah. And so that's the thing, man. Like there's a lot of work to be done here. And, we'll see if Jake Diebler's up for it. This is really going to be, I think, probably the most difficult stretch that he's going to have to endure or has endured so far as Ohio State's coach.
I can't see him being here a year from now. And it's not because he's a bad head coach. I just think that he's in an impossible situation. Yeah.
We'll see. I mean,
he doesn't have the program management stuff that you were talking about. He didn't have the experience doing that. It was... some people were willing to give him the benefit of the doubt last offseason because he had enough success on the court. And it's like you said at the top of this, and we've been saying for a couple of weeks, there's no doubt the guy is a good X's and O's coach. You don't just luck yourself into becoming the first coach in NCAA history to beat a top 2 team in your debut.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't, you don't just fall ass backwards into doing something like that. You have to know what you're doing within the sport in order to pull off a result like that.
Right.
And he had several impressive wins this year with this roster. The problem was just inconsistency, which was largely a product of roster construction, which you can forgive the recruit. What from a recruiting standpoint, you can forgive because the guy hadn't even been here a full year yet, being able to attract his own talent in. But at the same time, we're in a different era of college basketball where if you're savvy with the transfer portal, the way a guy like Dusty May had already proven he could be, you can fill in the gaps where you need to on a very quick revolving basis. That's exactly what Michigan did. That is not what Ohio State did. And the team's play suffered for it to the point where they finished with a worse record this year than they had last year.
I think what's going to be really interesting to me is how Ross Bjork handles all of this because, if Ohio State ends up with a worse record, if they end up with a losing record next season, obviously the calls to fire Diebler are going to be extreme, right? Because people are going to think like, oh, we can cut bait with this guy. We can find somebody else, blah, blah, blah. I think there's going to be a lot that goes into what the recruiting situation looks like, what the NIL situation looks like. If Ohio State is content just like doing what we've seen out of the Reds or the Browns or, other professional sports in Ohio, where it's like, look, we can make money with a mediocre product. That's fine. I don't know how much effort we'll see from Ohio State on that part. And it'll be interesting to see what Ross Bjork decides to do with that, because how patient can you afford to be? When one of your primary financial drivers is looking this kind of mediocre for this long. I don't know that that's sustainable, but maybe that's something that they're willing to accept. I don't know. We'll see. Ultimately, I mean, I agree with you. You get hired, right at the kind of the middle there of the recruiting cycle. There isn't a whole lot you can do about roster construction if you're Diebler at this point, but it's going to take years to really make it like quote unquote your team if you're not going to commit to the transfer portal. And it doesn't look like they're really doing that as much right now. So we'll see what happens in the next few months.
To your point about they're going to, difficult decisions are going to have to be made about how much they're willing to put up with relative to this being a potential revenue generator for the athletic department.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you think they kind of already showed their hand by promoting Diebler over hiring May a year ago? If they had been serious about getting the most out of this program, as opposed to electing to go with the great value option in Diebler,
mm-hmm.
Don't you think they would have invested in May?
I think that's part of it. I just think also they were kind of prisoners of the moment. If Ohio State fans, when that was announced, we were going against the grain and saying we were skeptical of this hire. I think most Ohio State fans were stoked about it. They thought it was great.
I think most of the people that we work with and kind of 11 Warriors as a whole was thinking that the wrong decision had been made.
Yeah, no, I agree.
But I do agree with you that it feels like a lot of the fans were prisoners of the moment. And it's hard for me to blame them, because if you recall the Big Ten quarterfinal, I mean, they got absolutely hosed by the refs in that game and still only lost to Illinois by 3 points. And if they beat Illinois, I mean, I'm pretty sure Illinois went on to win the Big Ten tournament.
I think they did. I could be wrong.
And they were a 3 seed, and they went all the way to the Elite Eight and lost to UConn, who ended up winning the championship. That was a solid team that they almost beat. And if they win that game, I think they are pretty easily in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
And nobody would have guessed that they would have even been close to sniffing that when Holtman got fired a month earlier.
Right.
Like, I mean, for Diebler to achieve that kind of a turnaround that quickly with the same kind of personnel that Holtman wasn't getting the most out of, it's hard to argue that he didn't earn a right to be a candidate for that job. At the same time, I think that it was pretty clear that he wasn't the best candidate for the job based on the fact that a guy like May was available. And that was reflected in the fact that once Michigan let Howard go, they moved very quickly to go snatch that guy up, that despite the fact that he had been bounced from the tournament in the second round to Northwestern last year, the year prior to that, or a year or two prior to that, I'm not sure if it was a year or two, but regardless, Dusty May took Florida Atlantic to the Final Four. I mean, come on.
Yeah. I mean, that's like in Men in Black when Rip Torn's asking Tommy Lee Jones if Will Smith has what it takes. And he's like, look, he ran down a cephalopod on foot. That's
I can
how
tell
I feel.
you as somebody that lived in Miami that Florida Atlantic is not the university that draws the most eyeballs or NIL dollars in that town. And yet between the set of schools that are around South Florida, the only one of them that has actually sniffed the Final Four in recent memory is the one that Dusty May was head coach.
The Owls.
That's right.
So I don't know. We'll see how this all plays out. Well, I will casually pay attention to the Crown tournament. I guess I'm not going on my way to watch it.
Let's be honest. We're hosting the show together. We're going to have to talk about it, regardless of how they do in that. So,
yeah. So it'll come up.
Dear listener, you don't have to pay attention if you don't want to. If you want to get the recap of it from us, we'll be happy to spoon feed it to you.
That's probably the best way to do it, frankly.
Just as we didn't expect Ohio State to make the NCAA tournament, don't expect great things from them in the Crown.
What if they win
whatever is to come?
What if they win it? Like, are we gonna have to?
I think we said the same thing about the NIT last year. And they lost in the semifinals.
Yeah,
and they were playing at home too to some scrub program. I don't even remember who it was.
I don't. Some A&T college I've never heard of. I have no idea.
It was bad.
Also, things that are not bad are Ohio State football. Spring football is almost upon us. That by the time you listen to these words, it will be upon us. We've talked a little about the quarterback position in terms of intriguing position battles, and we'll get more into spring football as more things come out. But
people are not pleased with your skepticism of Julian Sayin.
I saw that like somebody was like, how could you be skeptical? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, he hasn't shown, like, he's had limited playing time. In the limited playing time, he hasn't done anything. He didn't do much in the spring game. He's not a big guy.
You just think he's short. Yeah,
I do think he's short, but also like
you think he's Troy Smith remix.
No, that would be great if he's Troy. He's win the Heisman Trophy. But I haven't seen a lot of arm strength out of the guy. I don't know. Go back and look at if somebody really wants to do this, go back and look at every single pass that he attempted in game this past season. Look at his performance in the spring game, and if any of that did anything but underwhelm you, then cool. I guess you can support him. But like, I haven't seen anything from the dude that makes me excited about him yet. So, like I said, I think this needs to be an open competition between all of these dudes. I don't think appointing Sayin just because he was this hotshot recruit is a good idea at all. If he had gone in and this dude was like slinging it and we're like, hell yeah, this guy's got the sauce, that'd be one thing. But I haven't seen that. I didn't see that from the dude this season. And who knows, maybe, he goes into spring practice and blows everybody's nips off and everybody's like, yeah, let's go, Julian Sayin. But again, you know what? I am old enough to remember a time when Ray Small had the best spring out of anybody at Ohio State. And then he would wow people in the spring game and you're like, yeah, Ray Small. And then no, that was a terrible thing. Or Ty Williams. People don't remember that guy. 6'10". He wasn't 6'10", but a huge freaking wide receiver that did nothing, who had a great spring game. You got to see more than that. There's got to be an open competition. And Julian Sayin does not get his, he doesn't get his, his flowers from me just on his name alone. So that's my take on that. Are there any other positions, George, that you're like really looking forward to having your takes belittled?
My takes don't get belittled.
Oh, that's right.
I'm
That's
always
true. That's
right.
I forgot.
Except as it applies to Will Howard.
Correct. Well, he's no longer on the roster, so you don't have to worry about it. It's
That's
okay.
right.
It's all good. I don't know. I'm honestly pretty intrigued about the running back situation. I know that a lot of these guys, Ohio State alum and, the elder statesmen on the team are talking to Peoples a lot. That's cool. Another dude we have not seen a ton of, and it's hard to form any kind of real judgment on. But hey, if they're all about it, that's cool. But I do think it's going to be interesting to see how much he shows Ryan Day and company.
Well, not only that, we're going to really figure out how much of a talent Carlos Lachlan is in terms of raising guys up this year.
Absolutely.
I mean,
he had the easiest job on the team.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really walk into anything better than, inheriting a pair and a spare in terms of like, two guys that are presumably going to be at least second round draft picks in the NFL based on, current aggregate projections. So it's, we're going to find out really how good that guy is at raising guys up. Cause as much as, as easy as it is to like Peoples, and he did, show some stuff in relief last year, it's a totally different ball game when you're the lead guy in the offense as opposed to playing behind two guys that can really soften the defense and run the score up before you have to come in and kind of salt the clock away. And it at least looks a little bit thin behind him right now in terms of guys that are largely unproven, even if there's potential talent there. So it's it will be interesting to see what he does in that position. If you want to know, like in terms of having my takes ridiculous, where I think things are, my read on things are a little bit different than what everybody else is. I'm seeing a lot of praise being thrown the way of the tight end room.
Okay.
This year, particularly Mr. Clare that they just got from Purdue. This guy that is presumed. I first of all, I don't know how you can anoint this guy as the best tight end in the conference last year when he played on literally the worst team in the conference last year.
That's how you do it.
In one of the worst offenses.
That's how you do it. He was
I don't
the
know
only
how
guy.
you say.
He was the only guy worth a damn on the entire team. Like that's why.
I don't. Well, so that in that sense, that only in terms.
This is
of
a Calvin Johnson situation, right? Where you're like the one functional part of just a
Max
complete
Clare
trash.
is the Calvin Johnson of Big Ten tight ends.
Yes,
that is literally the comparison that is being thrust by the rest of the. Not only am I not sold on that because Purdue stunk the joint up last year and got shut out by Ohio State, but I've seen this movie before in terms of how Ohio State uses its tight ends.
Right.
You got to be a blocker. This guy does not fit the mold of being a blocker in the way that Ohio State likes using its tight ends, that Ryan Day likes using his tight ends. I don't see them getting the most out of that guy next year.
By the way,
I don't see him being Cade Stover next year. I just don't. And maybe I'll be wrong come October that the guy is already killing it. But you know what? If Max Clare is eating into the target share of Mr. Jeremiah Smith, this offense has problems.
No way, man. This is a tight end offense now. Sorry, Jeremiah Smith. He's going to have to learn to be a decoy. Real quick, how many yards?
So let's see what Claire has in this spring showcase.
How many yards?
Anointing him the best tight end in the Big Ten.
How many yards do you think Max Clare had against Ohio State this past season?
I'm pretty sure I looked this up. I think he had 2 catches for 13 yards.
You are exactly correct.
I'm always right. I am on the money with this stuff. Come on. I just pulled that out of my ass.
That's pretty good.
Are you kidding me?
Oh geez, man, Purdue got shut out.
I literally looked that up when people were talking about how great he was, and I was like, because somebody on Ohio State made a comment about like how they thought he was so good. Somebody at the combine was talking about Max Clare from Ohio State, and I remember thinking like They got shut out. Like, Claire didn't do anything that game. I looked it up. He's like, he had 2 catches for 13 yards.
Yeah. Purdue got
what
shut
are
out
they talking
3
about?
times last season. And in those games, Claire had a combined 10 catches. So
Yeah, so as soon as people were talking about this being a great portal acquisition for Ohio State, I was like, okay, let's.
I still think he's really good.
This is Perdon't we're talking about here.
I think in
Let's
general he
dial
is
it back
very
a
good.
bit.
I will say this. Against Penn State, for example, he had almost 100 yards receiving. A very good defense. Illinois, he had 133 yards. Like I think he's very good.
Who was the guy that you were calling one of the most unsung heroes of the offense this past season that played tight end?
Kaczmarek was fantastic.
Do you really want Claire eating into Kaczmarek's snap share?
Well, Kaczmarek, I called him the unsung hero because of his blocking. I thought he was an exceptional blocker, particularly in the playoffs. And if you watch him, like whenever he came in on their like jumbo packages, he's just eliminating dudes in the play. Same with Gerd, by the way, the fullback. I think Patrick Gerd. I mean, he was destroying guys. So Max Claire is not that guy. You're right. But we'll see what happens. We'll see. We'll see if the tight end mirage that we always find in the spring ends up evaporating in the fall. So that's some of the things that we're keeping an eye on for spring football. Let's go ahead and do Ask Us Anything. Before we do that, I want to remind you that the Dubcast is sponsored by the Dry Goods Store at 11warriors.com, drygoods.11warriors.com. Shirts, hats, stickers, all kinds of great stuff. Check it out. New shirts, in particular, celebrating that national championship. Ask Us Anything, which you can do by sending us questions to dubcast@11warriors.com, is going to start with actually just kind of a statement here from Anthony. Anthony said, heard you mention Eddie George's Broadway career. I saw him in Chicago and was mildly impressed. Not half bad for a football player. I enjoy the show. Keep up the good work.
I think he literally means the show Chicago.
Correct. Yes, the musical Chicago. Yes, that's which right. Eddie George was in. Yeah,
that's right.
I need to look up some clips. I want to find some clips of Eddie George, like because I'm having a really hard time imagining him singing. You know what I mean? Like that just. I don't know. For whatever reason, that just does not connect. My first major football memory was Eddie George rumbling for 300-some yards 313 yards, I think, against Illinois. That's one of my very first formative Ohio State football memories. And it's hard for me to envision that dude like on Broadway singing, in the musical Chicago.
The best rendition of Carmen, Ohio I ever heard was C. Grant. So don't put it above football players.
Oh no,
he
can be multi-talented.
Wonderful singers. He's got a good speaking voice, so
he does.
Yeah, I imagine he's
he does very polished. All right, this next one here. This is from Kevin, who wants to know, guys, which former Ohio State football player do you think would make the best football coach? As a bit of a segue. And I'll say this: let's limit it, or rather, let's limit it in the sense that we cannot use any current Ohio State football player alums who are in coaching. So no Kenny Guyton, no JT Barrett, just guys who have not entered the coaching ranks. Period is what I would say for the purposes of this question. Is there anybody in particular that comes to mind? Because I would say Cam
there's
Hayward.
Lots of people that come to mind.
I would put Hayward like at the top of that list. I think that dude is charismatic as hell and smart, and I think he would be an unbelievable coach.
He'll probably get there eventually. Yeah. Just on the sheer merit of how long his career has lasted in the NFL. At the same time, I would imagine that he's done well enough where if he just wants to enjoy retirement, the rest of his life, he doesn't need to. He
doesn't have anything to prove to anybody.
Yeah, exactly. So I think for that reason alone, I might be a little hesitant to say him, just because I would imagine if I had played at that high of a level for that long, the amount of work that goes into sustaining that level of excellence, like at some point you just want to be like, all right, let me take a little break before I, jump back into
He's been playing for a long ass time too. It's not like he's, been in
he's on the wrong side of 35 at this point, and he's still like a fringe Pro Bowl caliber player at his position.
He's elite.
He's one of the best. As a Steelers fan, he's been a treasure. Like he's
gotten better as he's gone
so
on.
bad when he finally hangs it up, whenever that is.
Yeah,
there's a lot of players to choose from. It's tough to say. We'll go Chris Chugunov. How about that?
Wherefore art thou chugs?
I don't know, man. There's so there. It's just a very broad question. I don't want to say it's a broad question. It kind of is, but there's so many different candidates to choose from.
There's always a guy like Malcolm Jenkins, for example, right? Like when I think of like guys who are potential head coaches and who have that, I tend to gravitate towards guys who had that charisma. You know what I mean? That were kind of the statesmen on the teams that they played on. And so, when you're I think a student at Ohio State, or when you're a younger fan, you kind of look for those guys. You want to find the guys who are kind of like, this is the face of that team. And for me, Malcolm Jenkins was when he was on that team, and another dude who had a long, really successful NFL career. I think Malcolm Jenkins would be another one of those dudes who I would say, like, I think he would be super successful as a head coach.
I know what my answer is.
Okay. All right.
Do you know what my answer is?
No,
Johnny?
I don't know what your answer is.
You know what my answer is.
No, I don't. Oh,
yes,
what?
Johnny
Says, unless it's Weber.
You know what my answer is.
Oh my God.
Come on, say it for me.
Mike Weber.
Johnny.
I don't.
It's got to be Master T.
It's not going to be Master T. I know you want to say
a leader in the locker room.
Sure.
A man that in a supporting role was able to achieve so many great things, such as honorable mention for all Big Ten.
Wow. What an accomplishment.
Such an inspiring story.
Yeah.
A guy that many, in terms of the theocracy that people would refer to, the foundation of Christianity that many of the Ohio State football players currently find themselves enthralled in. Many point to Master Teague III as being one of the founding
the progenitors, paterfamilias,
the prophets, if you will, that foretold of such a leader of young men in more ways than one.
Yeah.
And somebody who I've never seen the guy in person, but many people on the beat said he was one of the most physically impressive specimens of a human.
What does that have to do with coaching at all?
That is a big thing in terms of being a physical presence. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons the Lions respect Campbell so much is because he's always in there working out with them.
Yeah, Bill Belichick famously won a bodybuilding competition in the late 90s.
You know what? I mean, I know you want to talk about him a little bit later. He's clearly doing something right if he's pulling 24-year-olds.
Oh, so. That's true, yeah. It's the yoga.
Master Teague III is my default answer.
Cool. Last question. This is from our good friend Alvin, who wants to know, tell us about your worst travel experience story. Flight, public transit, car, hitchhiking, etc. All right, here's the deal. Okay. And this is my worst one. And I've had a lot of bad ones. But one of the worst that I encountered was when I was living in Japan. I was on a extended trip by myself to Nara and Kyoto, and I took the bullet train to get there because I was living in southern Japan. And that was great. Fantastic. Unbelievable experience. Trains to Japan are the best thing in the world. I love them. I had so much fun riding them. But to save money, for whatever stupid reason, I decided to take an overnight bus back from Kyoto to the city where I was living in southern Japan on the island of Kyushu. So it was about a 10 to 12 hour drive. And it was a bus, and it left, I think around 6 o'clock at night. And it would stop periodically for like food, at convenience stores and stuff like that on the highway. And for whatever reason, I decided I wanted to eat a convenience store buffalo chicken sandwich in
You've
rural
told me this
Japan.
story. You've told me this story on
Yeah.
the show before.
Yeah. And it did have a bathroom on board, but I'm
Yep.
approximately 6 feet 2 inches tall, and I did not fit in this bathroom very well, and I could barely shut the door, and I could not use it, and I had to use it very badly.
You stinky American.
It was
you.
so bad, and I had to go, but I couldn't because I'm literally like my knees are by my ears. Like I could not use this freaking toilet that was the size of like a toddler's toilet, and the bus is jostling around, which means the buffalo chicken sandwich is jostling around in my stomach, and I couldn't sleep. I was like sweating trying to hold all this in. Like it was the worst night of my life.
Nice.
Gastrointestinally. And I got to my hometown, where I was living at like probably 6:30 in the morning. The bus dropped me off unceremoniously by a, like a rice field, like a, just like in the middle of nowhere. Cause it was all like the town itself, the town proper itself was surrounded by like all these fields, all these, all these farms and fields and stuff like that. So I'm just sitting by a rice field, like praying that there's going to be a taxi that shows up for and so one mercifully did. I told the guy to just step on it and get me back to my apartment, and I made it, but it was not a good night. So the moral of the story is pay the money for the Shinkansen and don't eat buffalo chicken sandwiches at rural Japanese convenience stores. So
all right. I'm fairly confident I've told you this story off air before.
Okay.
There's a good chance that I've told this story on the Dubcast before. I'm not 100%. So if you're a listener and you recall this, forgive me for rehashing it. But the worst trip I ever had was my return journey from Hong Kong, when I was over there doing an internship through the Fisher College of Business.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for the return trip, I was supposed to sit in Economy Plus. Everybody else that I was on the trip with, or at least that was going back to America, there were like 50 kids going on the trip. A little over 40 of them were actually from China.
Okay.
So they were all like, they were able to, they were going to get picked up and driven home from Hong Kong or whatever. They're flying back to inland China. They were not going on the return trip to America with us because the school year was over. It was it was the end of June at this point, so we were not going to have to be back on campus until end of August later on. So me and like 5 other Americans are preparing to go back to the US, and they're all sitting in economy and I'm in economy plus, and I boarded the plane before them. So they're all passing by me to board the plane, and I'm looking, I'm like, yeah, have fun back there. I'm going to enjoy my economy plus.
That's right. Yeah.
So this guy in fatigues walks up to me after everybody's boarded the plane, and he asked me if I'll switch seats with him because I'm sitting next to his wife. And I've got an aisle seat. I don't necessarily want to give it up. But when somebody in fatigues that is presumably in military service asks you for a favor,
like, yes, sir,
you got to do it. Especially because I had no reason. Like, I was sitting next to his wife. So
yeah, sure.
It's like, okay, sure. But I didn't bother to look at where this guy was sitting before I agreed to do it. So I'm not going to make a point of going back and making the guy give up his seat after I've already surrendered it to him. This guy is in the back of Economy Plus, which has the wall separators to divide us. So this is a like 14-hour flight with that, and my seat doesn't recline.
Oh God.
Already terrible.
Right.
But it gets worse.
Yeah.
Because I'm sitting in the window seat. I think I wasn't in the aisle. I was either in the window or the middle seat, but there was only one other person sitting in the section with me. But the person I was sitting with was the most obnoxious travel companion I have ever had in my life. It was a man in his 50s from the Bronx or Queens or
oh
some
yeah, you have told me
neighborhood of
about
that
this. I
nature.
do remember this now.
And the guy, he literally had one of those voices where he sounded like this, Sonny. He smoked 2 packs a day, and I'm like, oh great. And this guy was like, at first it actually started great because he ordered, before we even took off, he ordered like maybe half a dozen mimosas for both of us.
Oh, let's go.
I just finished sophomore year of college. I'm like, oh, this is wonderful.
Yeah, of course.
But he's also like jokingly trying to pinch the stewardess's butt as they're walking away and stuff. And it's like, oh, he's one of these people. Great. While he's drinking.
Yes.
Probably already drunk. And then he offers me Xanax. And I should have taken it because it would have knocked me out. And then I wouldn't have had to deal with the unpleasant memories of the rest of the flight. Right. But I decided not to do it. Partially because I had just been drinking, but this guy's taking Xanax and drinking, so he's, sloshed beyond sloshed, and he's talking to me about a whole bunch of stuff that I don't care about. This guy is apparently like he owns a gallery in New York, and he's like a dealer of mirrors. He's talking to me about how his daughter doesn't respect him and was like spending all his money and crashing his boat. And I'm like, oh wow, your daughter doesn't respect you, and you're out here trying to pinch the butts of stewardesses. I wonder if there's some kind of overlap there. Anyway, it was terrible. And the guy,
no amount of mimosas would have made that better.
The guy finally knocks out several hours into the flight, but then while he's asleep, he's like restless in his sleep. He's like hitting me and stuff. It like literally like flailing arms, not just like rolling over and bumping up, like literally flailing his arms. And at one point I'm like, dude, I'm going to have to like call them and either ask you to move or whatever. If you keep it, he's like, I'm sorry. Whatever. And he was telling me like, I had planned to watch a bunch of movies on this return flight, and one of the ones that I had never seen was Goodfellas, so I was trying to watch Goodfellas, and he kept trying to tell me about how he knew Henry Hill or whatever. Is that what the guy's name is that Leota plays? He's like, yeah, I knew that guy. I'm like, dude, I don't care. Like, leave me alone.
Right.
I had to put up with that guy for 14 hours. Like,
yeah,
I don't know if it was 14. It was at least 11.
But
on
hey,
the way
at least
home
you respected our troops, and that's all that really matters. You did your duty.
I have not had to make a concession like that to a military member yet or since. Maybe I exhausted all of the. Like, I did my good deed for my life, and so the universe is saying, okay, we're not going to put you through that again. But if I am in that situation again, I am going to tell the person, listen, I respect what you do for us, but I have some
questions.
I have some terms and conditions. As a military man, I'm sure you can understand negotiating terms of
engagement. Yes. Yeah, there are rules of engagement here. And
if I'm going to surrender my seat to you, I would like to negotiate these terms of surrender.
Right. This is not unconditional.
If you do not have a seat that reclines, respectfully, you're going to see your wife when we all land. So
we're all going to the same place. It's fine.
Yeah. Oh my God. That was so brutal, man.
Yeah, that's rough.
Terrible.
Any flight where you're stuck, in a small metal tube with obnoxious human beings. I've been that obnoxious human being for a similarly long
The most stereotypical New York person I've ever met in my life, and I had to sit next to him for 14 hours while he was drinking on Xanax.
Awesome.
Unbelievable.
So that's Ask Us Anything for this week. Keep sending those in. We'll keep answering them. A couple things I want to say before we get out of here. First of all, I, as promised, attended the women's hockey game against St. Lawrence on Saturday. That was their play-in game to the Frozen Four. They destroyed St. Lawrence 6-1. I got to tell you something. I just want to give you a quick trip report. If you saw me there, I was the guy wearing the 11 Warriors hat. Had a hoodie on, my national championship shirt on top of that, so everybody knew that I am an authentic women's hockey fan.
But Johnny told me nobody confronted him at
nobody.
So if you really wanted to give him a piece of your mind in public, you missed your opportunity.
I will say this. You know what? the fans, I want to start with this. First of all, packed house. The ice rink at Ohio State near St. John Arena. We'll get into my feelings on that in a second. Super packed. The fans there were rowdy as hell. Everybody.
I heard the St. Lawrence fans were very naughty.
They were rowdy. They were pretty angry at certain points in the game, as maybe justified. As they were, but it was a great game. It was a great experience. The fans were on point. The pep band was there, and it was super loud because it's such a small enclosed space. Emphasis on small.
Now, based on the updates that you were giving me during the game, I was very worried because you sent a picture to all of us, and then about 2 minutes later, you told us that they got a major misconduct warning.
There was a 5-minute major.
I thought, oh, this is not going to go well for poor Johnny, who was looking forward to this.
No, and it was great. And so, the game itself, there was the 5-minute major at the beginning. Ohio State definitely earned it. An Ohio State skater basically it was elbowing technically, but she basically punched another skater in the back of the head. So she was sent off. But St. Lawrence only
as an
scored
MMA guy, I love the use of the elbows. I'll
never
discourage just that.
Destroyed a St. Lawrence skater. And so the 5-minute major misconduct. St. Lawrence only scored 1 goal. Ohio State equalized pretty quickly after that, and then it was just all Ohio State after that. You could tell after the 3rd goal when it was up 3-1 that St. Lawrence just kind of gave up, and that was it. But super physical game. Ohio State was all over the place. Joy Dunn, my favorite player on the team, absolute beast. She's nearly 6 feet tall. She's just, whenever she's on the ice, you just immediately, your eyes kind of gravitate towards her because she's fast. She's constantly pressing the attack, forechecking, all this kind of stuff. Like, she is just.
They call her No Joy Dunn.
She get her done. No, she she's tough, and it's a lot of fun to watch her on the ice, and the entire team in general. I mean, they just played really, really well overall. At one point, St. Lawrence tried to start some smack with Joy Dunn, which is really hilarious because she's easily the biggest player on the ice. And that did not go super well. She looked at her there was some St. Lawrence players almost a foot shorter than her, and trying to punch her in the back. She turned around just why are you doing this? This is a terrible idea on your part. Anyway, fans, team,
reminds
all
me of
on
when
point.
the Blackhawks would try to beef with that defender on the Boston Bruins.
Oh my god, yeah, the guy who's
6'10".
Zdeno, isn't he Chara? Isn't he 7 feet tall or some
Chara,
stupid
he's
thing?
literally 6'10", and it's why are you
Yeah.
trying to fight this very much larger human than
Yes,
you?
and that was the
don't
thing.
do that.
That's the thing with Joy Dunn. There's another patch on the team who's she's I think 5'10". So she's also very imposing on the ice. But in general, like I said, fans were incredible, very knowledgeable, very excited, young, old, parents.
I don't know how knowledgeable they were. I heard at one point the St. Lawrence fans were chanting Michigan.
Oh no, they were
Michigan
they
chants
didn't seem
to get to dig under Ohio State.
The Ohio State fans are very knowledgeable.
But then they pivoted at one point to chanting something about Ryan Day.
Yeah.
Somebody made the comment I don't know if they know that Ryan Day is now a national champion.
Yeah. That I think that's very likely that they weren't aware that Ohio State won a national championship in football this season.
Do you have
a
football team, St. Lawrence? Do you know what football is?
But the fans were on point. The team was great. The excitement, the atmosphere was awesome. If you haven't been to a women's hockey game, you absolutely need to get out to it at some point. Obviously next season because they're in the Frozen Four. Here's the overall point that I want to make. The actual facility, they've done everything they can to that ice rink to make it livable. They've given it, new coats of paint. They've tried to add in a bunch of graphics and show some of the history of the women's hockey team and some of their accomplishments and things like that. It's not enough. There has to be a Covelli Center type arena for Ohio State men's and women's hockey. At this point, it's stupid that there isn't. This is a very, very, very good program. Nadine Muzerall is an unbelievable coach, and they deserve it. You walk in. So the way it works is you'll walk in through St. John Arena. Okay. that's where the quote unquote concourse is. That's where they sell food and merchandise and things like that, literally on like folding tables. You walk through there, and then you have to walk outside to then get into the ice rink. And it's bleachers. It's bleachers in front of a rec center ice rink. And it's not enough. It's ridiculous that that's where they're at. And they deserve so much more than it. So,
well, one of the ways you pay for a new stadium is you triple the ticket prices from what, the typical fan is probably
sure, and fine. But the fact that fans were willing to pay a premium price to get in and watch it, I think, to me, says that they, meaning both the team and the fans, deserve something better than what they've got. And it bothers me a lot that the most successful program right now, like in terms of both the attention and the championships that they've won in recent memory at Ohio State, are playing in what's functionally a garage. That's not fair. And so I hope that they get a better facility, and Ohio State starts taking hockey a little bit more seriously. In addition to the women getting to the Frozen Four, Ohio State men won a really dramatic game against Penn State, and now they're going to be playing Michigan State for the Big Ten title. Okay, so this is not just women's hockey, which is doing really well. Men's hockey is doing really well. I like I said, I had a great time. I had a great experience. I think they deserve more than what they've got. Pistol won another natty. That's cool. A few other random bits here.
And I have to say, I am wondering if head pistol coach Emil Milev has a case as the best head coach at Ohio State over Miss Nadine Muzerall.
Well, it would be between him. It would be between him and Muzerall, and I think Coach Brown, right? Like friend of the website, Coach Brown, with artistic.
What is he? The
swimming.
Artistic swimming director.
That's
Artistic swimming. I don't know how long they've been an actual official sport. I know for the NCAA. I know
Chase
for a while Sink Swim wasn't, but Ohio State I know has been doing very well.
Don't make Chase come down there.
it bears repeating. Mr. Milev, the one-time silver Olympian for Bulgaria, the second shooter in U.S. history to qualify for 6 different Olympic events.
That's
he gets
wild.
done. He gets done at the 2016 Olympics. He says, I'm going to go to Ohio State and I'm going to give back to the students and I'm going to raise them up. A year later, he gives them their, I think it was their 4th title at the time since 2000, but the first under his tenure. And then they go on a bit of a hiatus for a couple years. And then 2021, they come back and they win their first of what is now 5 championships.
So anyway,
a quintuple
started
peak.
blasting.
That's right. And it bears. I mean, they beaten Navy by this year. They beat them on aggregate by like over 125 points. Last year they beat Navy on aggregate by over 300 points, which was a greater margin than what was between Navy, who finished 2nd place, and the 5th place team. And they're beating Navy, Army, Citadel. They're beating all of these military academies at their own game.
Well,
they're destroying the field.
I don't know how to feel about that, but either I don't know what that says about our military preparedness, but that's okay. That's fine.
It says, you know what? Don't focus on that part. It just says great things about where Ohio State is at.
Oh,
that
man.
They are.
I'll choose to believe that. Let's stick with that.
I want to believe women's hockey gets it done and earns their right to call themselves a dynasty.
I've said
this coming Frozen Four.
Yeah, I've said if they get to the Natty, I'm buying a Joy Dunn. I'm buying some Joy Dunn merch. Okay, they don't have to win. If they just got to get there, I'm going to do it. So
that being said, Pistol Team has been a dynasty for many years now, and they deserve their rose. Even if we don't have an arena in which we can necessarily observe them to the extent that we do women's hockey or any of the other maybe revenue generating sports at Ohio State.
They still deserves it. That's
give
right.
Emil Malev his flowers.
Damn right.
Because he deserves them.
All right, so that's the Dubcast for this week. We'll be back next week to talk about all the comings and goings of Ohio State sports. But until then, I'm Johnny.
I'm George.
And we'll see you next time.
Take care, folks.